You don't belong here. Officer Harris sneered, his voice dripping with disdain as he stood towering over Maya. What makes you think you're important enough to flash an FBI badge at me? The words hit her like a slap, but she didn't flinch. Instead, Maya stood there, eyes calm, her posture steady. The streetlight flickered overhead as the tension hung thick in the air. She didn't look like much, just a woman in a plain coat, standing alone on the side of the road. But there was more to Maya than met the eye. Behind her quiet demeanor, she carried the weight of years of experience and a badge that could make the toughest criminals think twice. Officer Harris, however, didn't know that. You think you're so tough, don't you? He continued, smirking as he pulled out his gun, letting it hang loosely in his hand. Maya's gaze never wavered. She knew the game he was playing, the power he thought he wielded with that badge and weapon. But what he didn't know was that Maya wasn't just any person. She wasn't just another target. She wasn't someone who would bend in the face of injustice. Harris took a step forward, his fingers tightening on the gun. I'm giving you one last chance, lady. Get on the ground before I make you. He paused, enjoying the silence, savoring his moment of control. But Maya, unmoved, simply responded, You can't control me. The words were calm, deliberate, but they cut through the night like a knife. She wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. She didn't move. She didn't raise her hands. She just waited. Harris chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. He thought she was bluffing. After all, who would challenge a police officer with a gun drawn, especially a black woman? His smirk only grew wider as he taunted her. You're not even worth the effort. Who's going to believe you? Maya's eyes remained steady, her hand slowly reaching into her coat pocket. What you're doing is illegal, she said quietly, and I'm not going anywhere until you stop. She pulled out a small card, the FBI badge that had been hidden all this time. Harris stopped mid-sentence, his eyes flickering to the badge in her hand. What? He said, his smirk fading as disbelief crossed his face. Your FBI? Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to. The badge spoke for itself. In that moment, the air around them seemed to shift. Harris's confidence wavered, just for a second, but that second was enough. He stepped back, stuttering, unsure of his next move. I don't know who you think you are, but you're about to find out, Maya interrupted, her voice firm. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number, never taking her eyes off him. The call was brief. I need backup. Now, she said, her voice sharp with authority. She had just called in the cavalry. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. Harris glanced nervously around, his arrogance crumbling as the realization set in. You can't do this, he stammered. I can, Maya said, her voice unwavering. And you will regret ever pointing that gun at me. 2 minutes later, a squad car screeched to a halt next to them. Officers spilled out, quickly surrounding Harris. The gun he had so confidently held just moments before was now in their hands, and his smug expression was gone. It had been replaced by a look of shock and fear. Harris was cuffed and led away, his rights read to him as Maya stood silently by, her eyes never leaving him. It was over. In less than 5 minutes, the balance of power had shifted completely. Maya's calm, steady presence had flipped the situation on its head, and now Harris was the one who had to answer for his actions. He was no longer in control. He was the one being taken away in cuffs. Maya didn't say a word as she watched him being led to the car. She knew this wasn't about her. It was about standing up for what was right. It was about showing that no one, no matter their rank or position, had the right to treat another person like they didn't matter. And Maya mattered. She mattered in ways Harris would never understand. I did not expect this to happen. The seconds that followed were some of the longest Maya had ever experienced. Standing on that street, watching as Harris was led away, something inside her shifted. She wasn't just standing up for herself anymore. This moment was bigger than her. It was about justice, about making sure no one else would face the same mistreatment. She glanced over at the squad car, where Harris was now seated in the back, his face pale, his arrogance completely dissolved. For a brief moment, Maya felt a flicker of triumph. It was a quiet victory, but a powerful one nonetheless. She stood there, still, as the sirens faded into the distance, blending back into the night. The cold air was starting to settle around her, but Maya didn't shiver. She had seen things like this before, had been through worse. But this time, it felt different. This time, she wasn't alone. She wasn't invisible. Are you okay? A voice interrupted her thoughts. Maya turned to find Officer Daniels, a younger cop who had been with the backup team. He was the one who had recognized her immediately, the one who had made sure the situation didn't escalate further. He had known who she was. He wasn't like the others. I'm fine, Maya said, nodding as she met his gaze. Thank you for your help. Daniels gave a small, respectful nod. No problem. We couldn't just stand by and let that happen. Maya didn't answer right away. She took a deep breath, letting the words sink in. We couldn't just stand by and let that happen. That was the difference. That was the line between the ones who did nothing and the ones who took action. And Maya had chosen to take action. It wasn't just about Harris anymore. It was about standing up for anyone who had ever been treated unjustly. For those who didn't have the power to fight back. You're going to be okay, right? Daniels asked, his voice softer now. Maya turned and smiled faintly. I will be. She was ready to leave, but something stopped her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Pulling it out, she saw a message from her supervisor. You did the right thing today, Maya. We'll be in touch. Maya felt a mix of emotions, relief, pride, and a lingering sense of caution. She had done the right thing, but the fight wasn't over. It never really was. She couldn't afford to let her guard down, not in a world like this. She glanced one last time at the squad car before turning to walk away. The streets were quiet now, but the adrenaline was still buzzing in her veins. It was in moments like this that she felt the weight of her work, the responsibility, the constant battle against an unfair system. But Maya had chosen this life, and no matter how difficult it got, she would keep fighting. Because that was who she was. She was someone who didn't back down. Someone who would stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. And she wasn't done yet. I have been in this line of work long enough to know that things can get complicated fast. Maya knew the dangers that came with every decision, every action. As she walked away from the scene, the weight of what had just happened started to settle on her shoulders. It wasn't just about the victory. It was about what came next. The system wasn't going to change overnight. People like Harris wouldn't just disappear. They were out there, and as long as they held power, Maya and others like her would have to keep fighting. The fight was far from over. She was deep in thought when her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from her mentor, Special Agent Harper. Maya, I saw what happened. I'm proud of you. But remember, this doesn't make things easier. You've just put a target on your back. Be careful. Maya paused for a moment, reading the message again. She had known Harper for years. He had been a steady presence in her life, someone who had taught her how to navigate the darker corners of the job. He was right. Maya's actions had made her a target. People like Harris didn't go down quietly. They didn't just let things slide. They would find a way to retaliate. She couldn't let her guard down now. The streets felt different as she walked, quieter, more tense. The city had always been alive with noise, but tonight it felt still, like a storm was brewing just out of sight. Maya's thoughts kept drifting back to Harris. His face, that arrogant smirk that had vanished so quickly, still lingered in her mind. He had thought he was in control. He had thought he could get away with it. But she had shown him otherwise. It wasn't just about power. It was about integrity. It was about standing up for what was right, even when no one was watching. The rain had started to pick up again, a light drizzle that fell softly, almost like the world was trying to wash away the tension of the night. Maya pulled her coat tighter around her and quickened her pace. She was almost home when her phone buzzed once more. This time, it was an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Maya Johnson? The voice on the other end said. It was calm, collected, but there was something unsettling about it. This is Officer Daniels. I think you should know, Harris is making calls. He's not going to let this go. Maya's heart skipped a beat. Harris was already trying to move things behind the scenes. She had known it was coming, but hearing it confirmed made her stomach twist. What's he planning? Maya asked, her voice steady despite the unease creeping up inside her. We don't know yet, Daniels replied. But we're keeping an eye on things. Just stay alert. I will, Maya said, ending the call. She stood still for a moment, letting the rain fall around her. The quiet of the night was suddenly suffocating. Maya had always known that the fight was bigger than her. But tonight, it felt more real than ever. The world wasn't going to change by itself. She couldn't change it on her own. But she would keep fighting. She would keep standing up for what was right, even when it felt like the weight of the world was pressing down on her. Maya took a deep breath and continued walking, her steps steady and sure. She had a job to do, and no matter how dangerous it got, she wasn't going to back down. Maya arrived at her small apartment, the door clicking shut behind her with a soft thud. The sounds of the city were distant, muffled by the thick walls that surrounded her. She locked the door, then leaned against it for a moment, taking in a long breath. It had been a long night, and the tension from the events earlier still lingered in her chest. She didn't know what to expect in the days ahead, but she could already feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Harris wasn't going to back off easily. She was sure of it. He was the kind of man who couldn't stand being bested, especially by someone like her. Someone who wasn't supposed to matter. Someone who didn't fit the mold of what he thought authority looked like. Maya tossed her keys on the counter and walked into the small kitchen. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the otherwise quiet room. She opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and took a long drink, trying to shake the nagging feeling in her gut. The phone call with Officer Daniels still echoed in her mind. Harris was making moves. She needed to stay vigilant. But she couldn't help but wonder just how far he would go. The thought of retaliation made her uneasy. She had faced difficult situations in her career, but this felt different. Harris wasn't just another corrupt officer. He was someone who had power, influence, and connections. He wouldn't go down quietly. Maya sat at the small dining table in her kitchen, her mind racing through the possibilities. She had always been able to handle pressure, but the idea of being hunted by someone like Harris was unsettling. She knew she couldn't afford to let her guard down. Not now. She had to stay one step ahead. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the last thing she wanted right now was company. Carefully, she stood up and approached the door, peeking through the peephole. To her surprise, it was Officer Daniels. She hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. "Daniels?" Maya asked, her voice cautious. "Everything okay?" He nodded, his expression serious. "Can I come in?" Maya stepped aside, allowing him to enter. He closed the door behind him and looked around, his eyes scanning the room briefly before settling back on Maya. "I didn't want to call you again, but things are escalating faster than we thought," Daniels said. Maya's stomach tightened. "What's happening?" "Harris is making calls. He's reaching out to people within the department. He's trying to make this go away." Maya frowned. "And you think he'll be successful?" Daniels didn't immediately answer, but his silence was enough. "What do you need from me?" Maya asked. "I've been talking to some of the others who witnessed what happened tonight," Daniels said. "There's talk about shifting the narrative. Harris is trying to spin this to make it look like you overstepped." Maya leaned back against the counter, her fingers tightening around the edge. "He's not going to get away with it," she muttered. "I know," Daniels replied, his voice firm. "But we need to be prepared. We need evidence. More than just tonight. Harris will go after you, Maya. And he'll go after anyone who helped you." Maya took a deep breath, her mind racing. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had witnessed the truth. It was about everyone who had stood by her. She couldn't let them suffer because of her actions. "What do we do now?" Maya asked. "We gather what we can," Daniels said. "We find the people who can back up your story, the ones who saw what happened, and we make sure we're ready for whatever Harris tries next." Maya nodded, determination settling in her chest. This was far from over, but she wouldn't back down. She couldn't. She had a responsibility to the people who believed in her, to the ones who had been silenced for far too long. The fight was just beginning, and Maya was ready. She wasn't going to let Harris get away with what he had done. Not now, not ever. Maya sat in her small apartment, the room silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. The weight of everything that had happened in the last few days was settling in. She had known from the start that standing up for what was right wouldn't be easy, but she hadn't anticipated just how much this would cost her. Harris was making his move, and Maya could feel it in every passing moment. She glanced at the clock, the seconds ticking by, each one pulling her deeper into the storm that was slowly but surely coming her way. She needed to prepare. She wasn't going to let Harris, or anyone else, drag her down. Maya leaned forward, pulling her laptop toward her. She began searching for any evidence that could strengthen her position. Her mind was sharp, focused, each click of the mouse purposeful. She knew what she had to do. It wasn't just about proving herself. It was about holding Harris accountable. She couldn't let his actions go unnoticed. Every page she scrolled through brought her closer to the truth, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. Maya needed more. She needed to make sure that when Harris tried to twist the narrative, the truth would come out loud and clear. A knock at the door interrupted her concentration. Maya froze for a moment, unsure of who it could be. She hadn't expected anyone, and her instinct told her to be cautious. She stood up and walked to the door, peering through the peephole. It was Officer Daniels again. She hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. "Daniels," Maya said, surprised to see him. "What's going on?" Daniels stepped inside, his expression serious. "We've got a problem. Harris is already trying to cover his tracks. He's talking to people, trying to get things swept under the rug. We need to move fast." Maya's stomach tightened. She had known things would escalate, but hearing it confirmed sent a chill through her. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice steady but determined. Daniels looked around the room before speaking. "We need to gather more evidence. We need to talk to the witnesses, the people who saw what happened. They're the key to making sure Harris can't spin this in his favor." Maya nodded. She had expected this, but hearing it made the weight of the situation feel even heavier. "I'll do what I can," she said. "But we need to be careful. If Harris is already making calls, we have to move quietly." "I agree," Daniels replied. "But we don't have much time. We need to act before he gets the chance to destroy any more evidence." Maya thought for a moment, her mind racing. "I'll contact the others, see who's willing to speak out. We need to get as much as we can, and we need to move fast." Daniels gave a small nod, his expression softening slightly. "I know it's a lot, but you're not in this alone." Maya looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. She wasn't used to asking for help, but she knew she couldn't do this by herself. The battle ahead was bigger than just one person. It was about accountability, about standing up to a system that had been broken for too long. "Thank you," she said quietly. "We'll get this done." Daniel smiled, then turned to leave. "I'll check in with you later. Stay safe, Maya." As the door closed behind him, Maya sat back down at her desk. The fight was far from over, and she had a long road ahead. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of resolve settling in her chest. She wasn't going to let Harris win. She wasn't going to let anyone get away with injustice. Maya stood up, taking a deep breath. This was just the beginning. She would make sure that the truth came to light, no matter what it took. She would keep fighting, for herself, for the people who had supported her, and for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Maya sat at her desk, the hum of her laptop the only sound in the otherwise quiet apartment. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, scrolling through the evidence she had gathered. It was going to take time, more time than she had, but it had to be done. Every piece of information, every witness, every detail needed to be meticulously compiled. She couldn't afford to miss anything. The clock on her wall ticked loudly, and she realized it was already past midnight. Despite the long hours, she couldn't stop. The situation was too important. Harris wasn't just a man she had to stop. He was part of a system that had been operating unchecked for too long. She thought about everything that had led her to this point, the small moments, the quiet determination in her chest. She had always known that the road ahead would be difficult, but now, it felt more urgent than ever. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. She checked the screen. It was Daniels. "Maya," he said when she answered, "I've got news. We've located one of the key witnesses. He's willing to talk, but he's nervous. Harris has been reaching out to him too. We have to act fast." Maya's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the break she needed. "Where is he?" she asked, her voice calm but urgent. "He's at a friend's place in the city," Daniels replied. "He's agreed to meet, but he's afraid. He wants protection before he speaks." Maya didn't hesitate. "I'll be there. Tell him to stay put. We're on our way." She hung up the phone and stood, grabbing her jacket. Her heart was racing now, but it wasn't fear. It was the rush of knowing that this was the moment. The moment everything had led to. She wasn't going to let Harris get away with what he had done. She grabbed her keys and left the apartment, her mind focused on the task at hand. The streets were quieter than usual at this hour, but Maya's attention was elsewhere. She drove with purpose, weaving through the empty city streets, the lights flashing by in a blur. The world outside seemed distant, disconnected from the tension she felt building inside. When she arrived at the address Daniels had given her, she parked her car and stepped out into the cold night air. The building was a few stories high, nothing special, but there was an urgency to the way the place looked. Maya took a deep breath before heading inside. She had been in situations like this before, but tonight felt different. This wasn't just about gathering evidence. It was about taking a stand. She knocked on the door of the apartment and waited. After a moment, the door cracked open. A man in his mid-30s peeked through the gap, his face a mixture of anxiety and relief when he saw Maya. "You're here," he said, his voice shaking. "You're the one who stood up to Harris, right?" Maya nodded. "I'm Maya Johnson. You're safe now. We're going to make sure your voice is heard." The man stepped aside, letting her in. His apartment was modest, but it was clear that he had been under a lot of stress. Papers were scattered around the living room, and the faint scent of coffee lingered in the air. Maya sat down across from him, her eyes soft but firm. "Tell me what you know," she said. The man hesitated, glancing nervously at the window. "I've been trying to stay out of this," he began, his voice low. "But Harris, he's been threatening me, telling me to keep quiet. I can't let him win." Maya listened intently, every word sinking into her. This was the key. This was the piece she needed to take down Harris. The man spoke about his encounters with Harris, about the things he had seen, the things he knew. He was scared, but he was willing to help. Maya nodded as he spoke, her mind already working through the next steps. Once they had the information they needed, they would be ready. They would expose Harris for what he really was. When the conversation was over, the man stood up, his shoulders less tense than before. "Thank you," he said, his voice shaky but grateful. "I'll do whatever I can to help." Maya gave him a reassuring smile. "We'll protect you. Just make sure you stay safe. This is far from over, but you've already made a difference." She stood and walked toward the door, her mind already on the next steps. The pieces were coming together. Harris wouldn't be able to hide behind his power much longer. Maya had a job to do, and she wasn't going to stop until she saw it through. Maya sat in her car, the engine running, but her mind elsewhere. The man's testimony kept replaying in her mind, each word, each detail. She knew this was it. This was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. But even as the pieces began to fall into place, there was still a lingering unease. Harris wasn't going to back down easily, and Maya had no illusions about how deep the corruption ran. The city's underbelly had many faces, and she had seen them all. She glanced at her phone, the time reading 2:30 a.m. The night was quiet, but she felt the storm brewing. She had no time to waste. The next move had to be calculated, precise. She needed to get to the courthouse first thing in the morning, but she couldn't do it alone. She needed backup. A call to Daniels was the next step. "Daniels," Maya said, her voice calm but sharp. "I need your help. Harris is covering his tracks, and we have a window to act. I have a lead. I'm on my way." Daniels responded without hesitation. Maya could hear the urgency in his voice, and she appreciated it. In moments like this, trust was everything. Daniels was the only one who had stood by her from the beginning, and she knew he had her back. "I'll meet you at the courthouse at 7, Maya said. "We'll need to gather the witnesses and make sure we have everything in place before Harris tries to move again." "Got it," Daniels replied, hanging up. Maya took a deep breath and drove off, the city lights casting fleeting shadows on the streets. The courthouse was only a few blocks away, but every second felt like an eternity. She knew she was running out of time. Harris was already making moves behind the scenes, and if she didn't act fast, all of this could be swept under the rug. When she arrived at the courthouse, the building was just beginning to come alive. The early morning light cast long shadows across the steps, and Maya felt the weight of the task ahead. She parked and stepped out, walking with purpose toward the entrance. As she approached the front doors, Daniels appeared beside her. "Ready?" he asked, his voice steady. Maya nodded. "Let's do this." They entered the courthouse together, their footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. It wasn't long before they found the first witness, a man who had been hesitant to speak out, but who now knew that his voice was more important than ever. Maya and Daniel spent the next few hours tracking down witnesses, piecing together the story. Each person who stepped forward added more weight to the case. They were uncovering a truth that had been buried for far too long. By the time the morning session began, Maya felt a quiet sense of confidence. The evidence was mounting, and with each passing minute, Harris's grip on the situation was slipping. Maya walked to the front of the courtroom, her eyes scanning the room. The defense was already in position, but she wasn't intimidated. She had done her homework, and now it was time to put the truth on display. As the judge entered, the room fell silent. Maya stood tall, ready to face whatever came next. She had fought too hard to get here, and she wasn't about to let Harris win. The trial had begun, and Maya was determined to see it through. As the proceedings unfolded, she felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. This was what she had trained for. Every word, every document, every testimony was another step toward justice. She could feel Harris's presence looming, but she knew the truth was on her side. With each witness that took the stand, Maya's confidence grew. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been silenced, everyone who had ever been overlooked. This was her moment, the moment she had been preparing for her entire career. She wasn't going to let it slip away. Maya sat in the courtroom, her heart pounding as the prosecutor called the next witness to the stand. The room was thick with tension, every eye focused on the witness box, where the man she had spoken to earlier was now taking the oath. This was the turning point. She could feel it in the air, the shift that was coming. Harris had made his moves, but now the truth was rising. Maya's mind was sharp, each piece of evidence falling into place, like a puzzle she had worked on for months. She had known that getting to this moment wouldn't be easy, but seeing it unfold before her eyes felt like the culmination of everything she had fought for. The witness, a middle-aged man in a simple suit, took a deep breath and began his testimony. "I was there that night," he said, his voice steady despite the nerves in his eyes. "I saw Officer Harris pull that gun on her. He was out of line. She never once reached for a weapon. I saw it all." The room was silent as his words settled in. Maya could feel the weight of them. This was the truth coming to light, the kind of truth that couldn't be ignored, no matter how hard Harris tried to twist it. As the witness continued, Maya turned her attention to the defense. Harris's lawyer sat at the table, looking increasingly uneasy. Maya didn't smile, but she felt a small measure of satisfaction. She knew that every word this witness spoke, every piece of evidence they presented, was closing in on the man who had tried to intimidate her. The defense tried to discredit the witness, of course. They always did. But each time they tried, the witness stood firm. Maya had watched this before, witness after witness testifying, their voices unwavering, their stories consistent. It was enough to make anyone doubt the narrative Harris had tried to create. She glanced at Daniels, who sat across from her. He caught her eye and gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that they were getting closer. The trial wasn't over yet, but it felt like victory was within reach. The defense lawyer leaned forward, trying to throw doubt on the witness's credibility. "You're sure you're not misremembering? It was dark, wasn't it? You could have easily mistaken the situation." The witness shook his head. "No, I know what I saw. I saw everything clearly. I was right there." Harris's lawyer pressed, trying to shift the focus. "But you didn't hear the entire conversation, did you? There were things you couldn't have known." The witness didn't flinch. "I saw what happened. The rest doesn't matter. I saw a man threaten someone who wasn't a threat. That's all I need to know." Maya's eyes were fixed on Harris now, who had become even more tense. His earlier confidence was gone, replaced by the discomfort of knowing his actions were being laid bare. The defense lawyer paused, sensing the change in the room. They tried one last attempt to question the witness's integrity, but it was too late. The damage was done. The truth had already been spoken. Maya could feel the courtroom shift, the momentum turning in her favor. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had been wronged, for everyone who had been overlooked, for the system that had failed so many for so long. The witness finished his testimony, and the judge turned to the defense. It was clear to everyone in the room that they were running out of options. Harris's facade had cracked. The trial continued, but the light of truth was growing brighter with every passing moment. Maya took a breath, her resolve growing stronger. She wasn't going to stop now. This was the moment they had worked for, the moment everything had led to. The trial wasn't over yet, but she knew one thing for certain. Harris wasn't going to get away with it. Maya stood outside the courtroom, her hands folded in front of her as she took a deep breath. It was over. She had done it. The trial had ended, and the jury was deliberating. She could feel the weight of everything that had happened. The long nights, the endless hours spent gathering evidence, the emotional toll of reliving the events. But in this moment, all of it felt worth it. She glanced at the hallway, her eyes searching for Daniels. She saw him walking toward her, a slight smile on his face. "You did great today," he said, his voice steady and sincere. Maya gave him a small smile in return. "We did," she replied. "We couldn't have done it without you." Daniel shrugged, looking modest. "You had everything you needed, Maya. You were the one who made it happen." She nodded, but there was something more in her eyes now, something that hadn't been there before. The trial had been a battle, but it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. "I never thought it would be this hard," Maya said, her voice soft. "It's never easy," Daniels replied. "But it's always worth it. People like Harris, they don't just go away. They get pushed back, and the people who are brave enough to stand up for what's right are the ones who make a difference." Maya nodded, her thoughts drifting back to the trial. It had been tough. Harris had fought tooth and nail, but the truth had been too strong to hide. She had felt the shift in the room when the last witness had taken the stand, his testimony sealing Harris's fate. The defense had tried to twist the narrative, but it hadn't worked. Harris was done. The system had finally worked the way it was supposed to. She had done what she set out to do. And now, she had a choice. The courtroom door opened, and a court officer stepped out, holding a piece of paper. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She looked at Daniels, who met her gaze with a knowing look. The officer walked up to them and handed Maya the paper. "The jury has reached a verdict," the officer said. Maya unfolded the paper slowly, her hands trembling slightly. As she read the words, a wave of relief washed over her. "Guilty," she whispered. The words seemed to echo in her mind, over and over. Harris had been found guilty. The justice she had fought so hard for was finally being served. Daniels clapped her on the shoulder, his grin wide. "You did it, Maya. This is your victory." Maya stood still for a moment, letting the words sink in. She wasn't sure what she was feeling: relief, exhaustion, pride. It was all mixed together, but she knew one thing for sure. She had made a difference. She had stood up against something bigger than herself, and she had won. The fight was far from over, but this was a victory. It was proof that the system could work. Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking her from her thoughts. She pulled it out and saw a message from her mentor, Special Agent Harper. "I heard the news. Proud of you, Maya. You did the right thing." Maya smiled, her chest swelling with pride. She had earned this moment. She had fought for justice, and it had paid off. Daniels looked at her, his expression softening. "I think you've earned a break," he said. Maya laughed lightly. "I think you're right." She glanced back at the courtroom one last time, then turned toward the exit. As they walked down the hall together, Maya felt a sense of calm settle over her. The case was over, but the work wasn't done. There would be more battles to fight, more injustices to right. But for now, she could take a breath. She had done what